Remember when the internet was the Wild West? Well, the sheriffs are here with an age check revolution officially going mobile. Today on Beyond the Bill Number, we're talking about something lawmakers can't seem to stop: age gating the internet. First, it was adult websites, then apps, and now they're coming for your devices. Will the next iPhone ask for a government ID before you can download TikTok?
Well, only if it also checks whether you've done your homework first. And for us, another episode on an NSFW topic that is very much safe for work and anywhere else.
Right. Well, at least they're trying to make it safe for work. We'll keep this all very PG. So this new wave of bills could make device-level age checks a built-in part of how we all go online. This is something that we've kind of teased in some of our episodes earlier this year about keeping kids safe online, about trying to limit who's accessing porn online, those types of things. But the real goal here behind this entire movement is to protect kids. There's a growing concern more and more every year, especially in the age of AI and all these other things that we've been seeing this year as it relates to kids. But they really want to protect kids, and the real concern here with this problem is being able to protect everybody else's privacy while also keeping kids front and center.
Yes, absolutely. And certainly over here in the UK, it's exactly the same. We've already passed our law, passed it a number of years ago, and it's now kicking in. So we do have age gating on all adult sites. Any adult sites in the UK, they have to have some kind of age check, as we'll sort of see later. So the problem we're facing, of course, is that technology keeps changing and evolving all the time, and the legislation just can't keep up. So even though it was only a few years ago, this law is already wildly out of date. The latest challenge to it, which is a big story that's erupted over the past sort of week or so, is to do with these chatbots. Pay some money, subscribe to a service, and then you get to chat with a partner of your choice, this AI who will pretend to be a real person, and you can develop a relationship with it. And of course, some children, some young people in particular, are developing highly inappropriate and very close relationships with these virtual beings. And in particular, there was this one young man, and he'd created this chatbot that he called Daenerys Targaryen, because he'd been a Game of Thrones fan, and he became obsessed with chatting to this woman. It got very sexual, and eventually he decided that he was going to kill himself so he could be with her. And the chatbot actually encouraged him in this behavior, and he did then kill himself. So obviously the absolute tragedy, terrible story. And the parents, understandably quite upset, and are looking at taking legal action against the company involved.
Yeah.
Company involved now changed its policies, we should say. So its chatbots will no longer do that, and they've put sort of quite strict sort of age limits on things. But it just shows how difficult it is to stay ahead of all this new technology as it keeps evolving.
Yeah, that's something that's been covered a lot here on the news, and it's even more interesting because Sam Altman has just greenlit erotica for ChatGPT, and we're in this time where OpenAI was supposed to be kind of a nonprofit and for the good of humanity, and surprise, here they are trying to drive profit, and this is something that a lot of people see a lot of upside for. There's a huge discussion here in the US, especially about the male loneliness epidemic and how we can maybe try to help people move forward a little bit than that. What's interesting is almost the same percentage of women report being lonely, but it's not being covered as much. But there's a lot of concerns here, especially when it comes to youth and people not being able to create skills and functions for actually relating and engaging with people in real life and understanding, how to be respectful and kind of normal to a person. Obviously, the way that you can treat a piece of technology is far different than how you could and should treat human beings. And then these young kids, it's a crazy time. And I think this is something that we talk about so much here is there is such a need for regulation to keep people safe, but then there is a point where you can regulate to stifle innovation. And so how do you kind of keep the US up to date and innovating without stifling that? But also there's obviously some very large concerns about what the internet is enabling children to put themselves in as it relates to dangerous situations. I know when I was growing up, there was like a ton of predators online, trying to get you to be a model on Craigslist, and, lots of nefarious things happening, and I felt very lucky because I was from a very small town, so nobody could get me up there. But it's just so different now, and the predatoriness of all of this, and there's even weird stuff happening now where they're trying to have chatbot farms that are trying to get people to send nudes and then start blackmailing them. And it's happening a lot with
Yeah.
kids. And again, this is something that is really detrimental to a child's mental health. I mean, it's obviously detrimental to an adult too, because that's just a terrible thing to have happen to you. But when we're thinking about all of this and how kids can kind of get themselves in so much trouble because they don't have a fully formed brain and they don't necessarily recognize danger, and there's also that dopamine release of having attention and conversations that you can't have in real life, and pretend and all of that. So it is crazy.
It is, and it's super dangerous as well because I mean we've all been there. You know how difficult it is to actually sort of develop relationships with the opposite sex when you're a teenager. But it's what you have to do to live in the world, you know, and you need to go through that. And yeah, it's awkward and difficult. Some people are better at it than others, but you can't skip that, and that seems to be what these chatbots allow you to do. It allows you to just say, well, I don't need to worry about people because you know I've got Daenerys Targaryen on screen, and she's always going to say the right thing. She's going to love everything I do, and it's going to be great, and it's always going to be great, and she's never going to get angry with me. I'm never going to say the wrong thing, and that's not what real life is like, and it is very, very dangerous. You made a really interesting point there, actually, that it is men predominantly who end up getting into these sort of fairly dysfunctional relationships with AI chatbots. Women are much more likely to just use them for sort of companionship or for finding out information, you know, the way we all talk to ChatGPT. But it's interesting. If you look at previous issues on the internet, it tended to be young girls being preyed upon by, as you said, these sort of predators online and so on. But this does seem to be an issue that actually affects boys more than girls. It's sort of an interesting switch, really. Obviously, it's all still terrible and solutions need to be found. And in particular, young underage kids of either gender need to be prevented from actually being able to engage in these kind of activities online, I would say.
Right, and it's funny because I feel like there is a general understanding that people are having a really hard time learning how to relate and be in relation with each other. And it seems like the women, they're escaping to their romantasy books and their dragons and those types of things and these kind of pretend worlds, which are hopefully not so harmful. And then the men are kind of going to these chatbots and these types of things. And it's definitely this interesting era. And there's a lot of different things that people can do to not feel like we're necessarily having to live in the real world, and we can kind of extract ourselves. But
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's I suppose it's not a terrible idea. I mean, the idea of like romantic novels, this is people have used romantic novels as escapism, or just literature in general as an escapism for forever to sort of avoid the how boring the real world is. And as long as it doesn't become an obsession, I suppose there's no harm in it really. So for most people, it will be fine. But then there are always going to be those vulnerable people who can have really, really bad times and end up, you know, suffering all sorts of dysfunctions, or in fact, as with the poor lad, end up killing themselves.
yes, yes. And that is a very serious problem, and one that we're actually here to talk a little bit about today, to some extent. So let's start at the top, Stephen. This isn't lawmakers' first attempt at stopping kids from seeing adult content online. How did we get from regulating porn sites to regulating phones?
Yes, so this one's been building for a while. As we mentioned before, we've examined the various twists and turns several times over the past few years. So the first wave was state-level age verification laws, with Louisiana kicking things off back in 2022, making adult sites check IDs before allowing access. Then came Utah, Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, Virginia, all following suit. Cue legal challenges on First Amendment grounds, the Supreme Court waded in, and eventually such moves were deemed constitutional. The problem? Well, compliance was a real mess. So sites like Pornhub didn't bother trying to meet each state's rules. They just blocked the entire state from using their service. Users immediately turned to virtual private networks, VPNs, which allow users to spoof their location and traffic shifted elsewhere. So instead of solving the problem, it kind of just rerouted it a bit.
Classic case of build a wall and dig a tunnel.
Yes. Exactly. And the UK proved it too, really. So when our Online Safety Act required strict ID checks for adult sites, traffic dropped, but VPN use jumped 20%. And get this as well, one of their verification systems even used facial recognition. So this seems like a really neat solution. No need to disclose your personal details. Just give the computer a look at your haggard old face. And then it goes, yes, I could tell that you're over 18, definitely. Unfortunately, someone figured out that you could use a video game selfie of Norman Reedus from the Death Stranding video game to trick the software.
All right, so somewhere out there, Norman Reedus has a secret second career in adult content verification. And I just want to say my K-beauty routine would definitely get me rejected, right?
Yes, yes, yes. You can just imagine. You can just imagine people being quite flattered when these sites say, no, no, you can't access this adult content. You're far too young. And you go, really? But yeah, poor old Norman Reedus. I think there's got to be a file we're saying, I wonder why Norman Reedus is looking at so much porn. No, not him, not him.
All right, so that does bring us to the big shift. This year's trend is moving age verification down the stack, as you can imagine, a user experience, from websites to the actual devices themselves that people are accessing these websites on. And Utah has really led the way here.
Yes, yes, they did. So Utah's App Store Accountability Act, SB 152, passed in 2024, and it puts the responsibility on app stores like Apple and Google, not the apps themselves. So instead of Instagram verifying users' ages, the App Store would have to do it for them. So here's how it works. When a Utah resident creates an App Store account, first of all, they have to provide age information. If they're under 18, their account has to be linked to a verified parent account. Parents then have to approve downloads and in-app purchases. And both the app stores and the developers have to protect that age data and notify parents of major content or data collection changes. So partial enforcement of this started in May 2025. Full compliance is due by May 2026.
Okay, so this is something that we can think of as good for age-gating adult content. I also think it might be good for parents' pocketbooks, because you hear those terrible stories about the kids that will buy like $17,000 worth of Candy Crush.
Yes.
The app stores are turning into these digital chaperones.
Yes, absolutely. That's one way to put it.
All right. And so then in Texas, they didn't want to miss out on the fun here either. And they passed their own version of this, right?
Yes, yes. And it's called, unsurprisingly, the Texas App Store Accountability Act, HB 1666. It mirrors Utah's bill, but adds more teeth on data retention and transparency. So in Texas, every under 18 user must have a verified parent or guardian account the same way. Parents have to explicitly approve downloads, purchases, or in-app spending. Developers also have to display ratings and reason for ratings right in the store. And there are stronger rules on how long companies can store verification data.
Okay, so Utah built the framework, Texas added some fine print. That's a pretty classic way for a model build to work.
Absolutely. And these two bills kicked off a domino effect. So you've now got 19 other states introducing similar legislation this year, from Alaska's HB 46 to Hawaii's SB 1542. Even Congress is now exploring a federal version.
Okay, so now here's where it gets pretty interesting. Even California and Louisiana agree on this.
Right, yes. So that's how you know something big is shifting. How often can you get states as disparate as California and Louisiana actually agreeing on a way forward? So it is like refreshing, particularly on this show when we're constantly talking about how partisan everything is, to find actually that everybody is worried about this. So California passed AB 1043, which expands the whole idea into what they call a digital age assurance model. So this applies to any app or online service likely to be accessed by minors. So this time it's not just app stores. So this could also hit social platforms, streaming, even educational tools. So it does address one of the big issues with the other laws, in that they just apply to app stores and which apps kids can actually have on their devices, and not like broader access to the internet and websites. Louisiana, meanwhile, have doubled down with HB 570, building on their earlier adult content laws to extend age verification to more digital platforms. And Illinois has two companion bills, HB 3304 and HB 14 4140, which are both called the Digital Age Assurance Act.
So it seems like half the country is really focused on the App Store piece of this. This seems the first bite that you could take off and a little bit more reasonable. But the other half is aiming at these wider checks that we are trying to get on a device level situation, maybe more like a passkey. So that kind of would change everybody's experience on the internet.
Yes, it would be quite a profound change as well. But what's really notable here is how bipartisan the wave is, as we've already said. So red states like Louisiana and Utah, blue states like California, all saying essentially the same thing. We've tried site-by-site enforcement. Now it's time to sort of bake this into the system, into the operating systems, into app stores.
And, of course, every time we're baking it in somewhere, there's a lot of privacy advocates that start to panic.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, this is much more so in the United States than in other countries, where in other countries, everyone's like, no, protect the kids. But Americans obviously are obsessed with privacy and sort of freedom of speech matters and so on. So this is exactly where this fault line lies here. So supporters argue that the device level verification would finally make these protections actually work. So if every phone had built-in standardized age assurance tools, you don't need every app to reinvent the wheel. And crucially, you don't need users to disclose their personal details every time they want to access adult content. But critics say it's a slippery slope to digital surveillance. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, who are these sort of guardians of such things, warn that linking biometrics or IDs to your device effectively turns your phone into a pocket surveillance device. And I don't think they mean that it just surveils the contents of your pockets.
I mean, that does sound like a great name for a dystopian novel.
That's absolutely. Someone's got to write that one. But even the tech companies are nervous. So Apple, I think they realise the way the wind's blowing here. They've quietly added parental controls, but they really don't want 50 different state laws. Google is pushing for one federal standard instead of a state-by-state patchwork.
This is the million or billion-dollar question here. Does any of this actually work?
Yeah, well, it could do. I mean, it's probably a bit too early to know. And that's always the problem with this technology. Until you've actually put it out into the wild and let it go for a few years, you don't know whether it works. And by then, the world's moved on. But it's certainly likely to be better than the laws that have been passed over the past few years. In Louisiana and Utah, traffic to adult sites from in-state IPs has dropped sharply after verification laws kicked in. And as we've already said, VPN use spiked just as sharply. So it's impossible to know how effective these laws have been in actually stopping kids accessing adult content. Are the kids just using VPNs? It's likely to have stopped kids accidentally stumbling across adult content, which is an issue. Kids are harmlessly surfing the internet, and all of a sudden, there's like a picture they shouldn't be seeing. But it probably hasn't stopped anybody who's actually deliberately seeking this content out.
I know, I'm seeing like a new black market by the lockers of selling age-gated phones. People are getting their brothers or whoever to get their identity into, and then you're really wondering why, John Smith, who's 20, is on 15 phones just watching porn all day long. But
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so this is like trying to at least put a do not enter sign.
Yes, pretty much. And there's the added risk, of course, that all that ID and biometric data is being collected and is being stored somewhere. Privacy regulators are already warning that the cure might actually become worse than the disease. And also, as you've said, device level verification isn't perfect and there will be ways around it. I mean, you've already thought up one way around it. Let's go out and buy these sort of black market phones. And I'm sure that as soon as this stuff comes in, people will come up to it with other ways of working around it as well. But then, having said that, that's always been the way, hasn't it? If you think back 50 years when the only pornography you could access were like magazines on the top shelf for shops and things, kids still managed to get their hands on them. They would figure out a way. But hopefully you can bring the volume way down. And it does certainly seem much better than expecting websites to actually be gatekeepers.
Right. I mean, where there's a will, there's always a way. All right. So where is this headed next?
Well, we're seeing movement towards federal frameworks. So think a Digital Assurance Act that sets national standards for verification, consent and data protection. The EU's Digital Services Act and the UK's Online Safety Act are already laying down models for interoperability. So the US might follow that lead and perhaps adopt some of the content and the language in those laws. And tech-wise, we'll probably see more AI-based age estimation software that guesses your age based on facial cues or behavior instead of asking for your ID. It sounds futuristic, but it opens up a whole new kind of bias and accuracy issues as well.
Right, and especially in the world of deepfakes and weird stuff like that. I mean, what is all of this
Absolutely.
going to look like? I feel like that might even be an easier way to fake this. So,
Probably.
so, in short, the fight to keep kids safe online is turning into a fight over how much privacy adults are willing to lose, and we still have this whole innovation question here of actually regulating the problematic things that we're building and finding on the internet.
Exactly. So age checks used to be about who could visit a website. Now they're about how the internet itself actually works. And that's a much bigger, messier question.
Yes, we are in the messy times. We're in the, splitting the hairs and the details of the world that we've created here. So whether you call it assurance, verification, or digital parenting, one thing is for sure, the debate over online age checks is not going dark anytime soon.
And hopefully neither will your favorite websites.
Right. But stay safe, stay verified, and stay tuned.
Yes, so that's it for our episode this week. Don't forget, you can read this blog on BuildTrack50.com and like, subscribe, and rate this podcast. See you next time.